All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors for today's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Yoel Sara Kelman, in honor of the birth of their daughter Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that all those davening for the bracha of children shall have their tefilos answered b'karov. To thank Teri Czinn for dedicating the shiurim this month in honor of their grandchildren Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali, Moshe, and Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the shiurim this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, Ben Rabbi Ervin Menachem. We also dedicate our day of learning today in commemoration of the yahrzeit R Rabbi Preis, Zichrono Livracha, HaRav Shlomo Aryeh ben Moshe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the second Rav here of the shul for over a quarter of a century. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And I will say with that, let us begin. The beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. We are picking up today's daf is Daf 9. We are picking up the Mirza Hashem on Ches Amadeus, kind of like the middle of the page. So we're picking up Ela Amar Rava. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 lines up from the bottom. So also remember again, we left off in the middle of the really interesting sugya of the distinction between a Metzora Muskar and a Metzora Muchlat. Metzora Muskar. So if you think about it, by the way, the term itself, actually, Metzora Muskar, sometimes is a little bit misleading. Because Metzora means what? Someone afflicted with tzaras. Muskar means what? He's quarantined in order to what? To see if he has tzaras. Now it turns out a Metzora Muskar, in the end of the day, actually what? Doesn't have tzaras. So he's not really a Metzora. But again, you understand, we call it a Metzora Muskar. He's someone who's quarantined with the suspicion of tzaras, versus a Metzora Muchlat, who is someone ultimately, again, who has been positively diagnosed with tzaras. So the Mishnah said the only distinction between the two of them is as follows. A Metzora Muchlat requires priya and prima, allowing his hair to grow, rending of his clothing, and part of his purification process is the bringing of birds. And a Metzora Muskar does not have those halachas. So says the Gemara, Allah Amar Rava Mehacha. So Rabbi, remember again, we're speaking about how do you know how to make this distinction. So Rabbi says it's from here. Allah Amar Rava Mehacha. Vatsarua asher bo hanega. The pasuk says the Metzora who will have the affliction. So mishet tsar aso teluya begufo. This refers to someone whose tsaras is dependent on his body. This comes to exclude a person, what we call the Metzora Muskar, whose saras is interesting, whose saras is not dependent on his body, but rather is dependent on days. Which I will say, if we take a look at Rashi, it's about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 lines up from the bottom. Yotza, well actually Asher Bo, Mashma, Mishet Tsar Asa Teluyatum Asa Begufo, Shekals Machlon Estrapim Imenu Tame. So I will say, so ultimately again, who do these halachos apply to? Someone whose saras is dependent on his body. But someone whose saras is dependent on days. Look at Rashi. Yatza Muskar Shetim Asa Teluya B'mei Hesker. Into them, the Metzora Muskar, right, his saras is very much anchored in being sequestered, being quarantined for 7 days, and then coming back afterwards, and the Kohen coming back afterwards to see what's going on. So the Gemara says, when the pasuk says all the days of the nega will be tamei, mishet tsar asa teluya begufo hu de ta'un shiluach v'she'in tsar asa teluya begufo in ta'un shiluach. So we'll say, based on this, you would say only someone whose tzaras is dependent on his body, which means a Metzora Muchlat. Only such a person requires shiluach. Rabbi says shiluach means he has to be sent out of the camp, or for our purposes, outside of the walls of the city. But someone who's being quarantined for a tzaras, perhaps he does not have to be sent out of the city. Maybe you'll say that is indeed the case. Gemara says that's not the case. Yet we saw in the Mishnah, the only distinction between a Metzora Muchlat and a Metzora Muskar is priya and prima, allowing the clothing tearing the clothing and allowing his hair to grow. But I will say regarding Tumah, as well as regarding Shulach, the obligation to send him out of the wall of the city, both are the same. Amrlei Yemei Kol Yemei l'Rabos Mitzora Muskar l'Shiluach. Since the pasuk could have just said Yemei, but instead it says Kol Yemei, the extra word is a ribui to come to teach you that even a Mitzora Muskar, even a quarantined Mitzora, must be quarantined outside of the city. Ihachi taglachas v'tziporim my time Allah. If that's the case, then why not include the obligation to shave, to haircut, shave, and bird offerings for a Mitzora Muskar when he comes out of his quarantine as well? The Gemara says, my time alone. Diktani ein bein tar mitoch hesker, but tar mitoch hechlet, ela taglachas v'tziporim. Because after all, we saw the Mishnah said that it's only a Mitzora Muchlat who has to go ahead and has the hair cutting, shaving obligation and bird offering obligation. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Amakra, Abai said the pasuk is v'yatza hakoyel michutz lamachaneh v'hinei mirpa nega hatzaras. The pasuk says the kohen will go outside of the camp, and he will see that the tzaraas has healed. Mishet tzaraso tzeluya berefuos. Who has to go ahead and bring the birds, and who has to go ahead and do the shaving and the haircutting obligation? That's only a person whose tzaraas was taken away through healing. Yotza zeh she'ein tzaraso tzeluya berefuos eli yamim. But we'll include the Mitzora Muskar, whose tzaraas is not really remedied through quote-unquote healing, but rather is remedied through what? Through the passage of time. Beautiful. So I'll say, once again, the beauty of these sugyas is, interestingly enough, if you notice, by the way, the theme over here, again, like I said, these are called the Ein Bein sugya. But if you notice, the beauty of these Gemaras is no one's actually arguing over the Mishnah. In other words, the Mishnah statements are agreed upon. Interestingly enough, there's just a discussion about how the Mishnah arrived at those conclusions. So bottom line, the takeaway from this is that halacha l'maisa, we have two different types of mitzoras, what we call a mitzora muskar and a mitzora muchlat. Mitzora muskar, quarantined mitzora, really he's an individual quarantined under a suspicion of tzaraas, versus a mitzora muchlat, a confirmed case of tzaraas. Distinction between the two of them, well, there's two levels of distinction. There's distinction in their tumah, quote unquote, and in their tara. In their tumah, it's that a mitzora muchlat, confirmed mitzora, has to tear his clothing, has to let his hair grow. Mitzora muskar, quarantined, suspected mitzora, does not. And on the purification end, when the mitzora muchlat is purified, he has to shave, take a haircut, and bring bird offerings. The Mitzora Muskar, who essentially is the suspected Mitzora, who is then found not to be a Mitzora, does not have these obligations. Beautiful. Mishnah. I will say now we come to a very interesting sugya. Ein bein svarim l'tefillin mezuzos. There is no distinction between svarim. Now I will say when we speak about svarim, Rashi says over here, Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim. Now remember again, I will say just to understand, from the Mishnah's perspective, how are we writing these books, so to speak? Scroll form on a cloth. So there's no distinction between how you write Torah, right? This Torah scroll, Nevi'im or Ksuvim. There's no distinction between them, and Tefillin and Mezuzos, which are also have to be written on cloth, except for the following: Ella Shasfarim Nichtavim B'chol Lashon. So they both say Sfarim, which sounds like over here. So a Sefer Torah, a Sefer of Nevi'im, a Sefer of Ksuvim can be written in any language. Tefillin and mezuzos eino nichtavos ela ashuris, and tefillin and mezuzos could only be written in lashon hakodesh. I will say, here's what's interesting. You see, ashuris normally refers to a type of script. That's, let's say, for example, when you open up a Sefer Torah, you're looking at, that's called ksav ashuris. Here, the Mishnah is using ashuris to talk about a type of script and also to talk about lashon hakodesh. So herein lies a fundamental distinction. Tefillin and mezuzos could only be written in ashuris, which means Hebrew, with Lashon HaKodesh, with this particular script called Ashuris. But interestingly enough, all other Svarim, Sifrei Torah, Sifrei Nevi'im, Sifrei Ksuvim, can be written in any language. Incredible. Rav Shimon says, no. Af b'Sfarim, lo hitiru sheyichtivu al Yavanis. Rav Shimon says, not true. Even Svarim. Right, even Svarim, Sefer Torah, Nevi'im, Ksum, I'm going to stop saying it because you understand, right, can only be written in Greek. So Rabbi Shimon limits. He agrees that it is possible to write Svarim in a different language, but only in one other language, only in Greek, not in any other language. So we'll say, let's analyze. Says the Gemara, Hada Tofran Begidin Ulatamei Sayadayim. What do you see from here? The obligation to go ahead and piece the parchment together with sinews, right, Gidin. and the fact that Kisvei Kodesh transmit Tumah to the hands, like we saw last week, or Sunday, Zev Zeh Shavin. Both are the same. Both, again, Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, I should say Sfarim, Tefillin and Mezuzos are all governed by these same halachas, that again, pieces of parchment must be attached with sinews, and that they're Metamei Es Hayadayim. Good. So we'll say, let's analyze. Now we're going to focus on Sfarim. So this is really very interesting, because we'll say, by the way, if you notice, in a Sefer Torah, right, how do you keep the pieces of cloth together? Those are attached with sinews, right? We call gidin, right? Gidin from a kosher animal. Same way that, again, your tefillin, right? The batim are sewn together with gidin. So the idea, so therefore the Gemara says, both for tefillin and mezuzos, as well as for Sfarim, the basic halachos of use of gidin and metamei sadayim apply. So we'll say, now watch this. Remember, so now the Mishnah said, Sfarim can be written in any language. Says the Gemara, or minhu. Let me contrast this with a brisa. What does the brisa say? Mikra shekasvu targum. We'll say if you have a pasuk that you wrote in Targum, in another language. Look at Rashi. Mikra shekasvu Targum. Sefer shekasvu b'lashon hakodesh haray lichtov bo mikra shekasvu lashon arami. So we'll say, let's say you have a sefer that was supposed to be written in Hebrew, and instead you wrote it in Aramaic. Now, by the way, Targum means Aramaic, but it means any other language, right? In other words, Aramaic is just the example they're giving over here. So a person has a pasuk or a sefer that they were supposed to write in Hebrew, and you wrote it in Targum, in Aramaic, or Targum shekasvu mikra, or let's say you had a pasuk that was supposed to be written in Aramaic, but instead you wrote it in Hebrew. They both say, where do you have a concept like that? Look at Rashi. V'kaso ivri, o sheloshina esh lashon alashina. The Targum shayrei lichtav Targum kegon yigar sahadusa. So we'll say, we'll get to this in just a little bit. But there are foreign languages in the Torah. For example, again, when Lavan goes ahead and runs after Yaakov Avinu, and they meet up, and Lavan agrees not to harm Yaakov, but essentially what they do is they create like a line of demarcation. You don't go, neither of us will pass this line. So they made a pile of stones, and that served as the line of demarcation. So Yaakov called it Gal 8, right, the pile of testimony, and ultimately Lavan called it Yigar Sahadusa. What language is Yigar Sahadusa? It's Aramaic, right? Some form of some earlier Semitic language, right? Ultimately, again, so that's an example. So let's say instead of writing Yigar Sahadusa, you just wrote Gal 8, or you wrote Gal 8 twice. So what's the halacha? Or the Gemara says, right, so Mikra shekasu Targum shekasu Mikra, uksav ivri. Both ksav ivri is, Rashi says over here, is still writing Lashon HaKodesh, but you use a different script. You don't use the script of Ashuris. In all of these cases, Eino Metames Hayadayim, if you write a scroll like this, so again, there's three possibilities. Either you wrote a scroll that was supposed to be in Hebrew, you wrote it in Aramaic, or it was Aramaic, but you wrote it in Hebrew, or you didn't use the Ashuris script. In all of these cases, this scroll does not convey ritual impurity to the hands. Now, we saw this already yesterday. What does it mean if it doesn't transmit ritual impurity to the hands? What does that tell you? It's not Kisvei Kodesh. The only time that a sefer transmits ritual impurity is when you write it on cloth, that's sefer, Ashuris, the script like a Sefer Torah, and Dio, a special kind of black ink. And Rabbi say, what do you see from this contradicts the Mishnah? Because what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, Rabbi say, how can you write Svarim? What did the Mishnah say? Any way you want. Right? I can write a Sefer Torah, Sefer Tanakh, Sefer Ksuvim, in any language that I want. And yet here, the Brisa clearly indicates that that's not the case. The Brisa says in order to write a Sefer, it's got to be, again, ala Sefer parchment, Ashuris, and Dio. So what's going on over here? How do you reconcile the Brisa with the Mishnah? Rava says, look, Asha, it's not a contradiction type of test. Kan begufan shalanu, kan begufan shalahen. This is very interesting. So Rava wants to suggest that our Mishnah is talking about a situation where halacha lamaisa, you wrote a Sefer Torah, let's say for example, in a different language, but you used our alphabet. So imagine for a moment, you wrote the Sefer Torah in a different language, but you used Ksav Ashuris. Use Ksav Ashuris, so different language, but our letters. Our letters. So imagine, by the way, you wrote a Sefer Torah in English, but it's not in English. In other words, it's written in Hebrew letters, spelling out English words. Right? So Rava says that's one way. So that would be kosher. In other words, that Rava will say the Sefer itself must always be Ashuris letters, but you could use Ashuris letters in a different language, versus the Braisa, Kan Begufan Shalahen. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Kan Begufan Shalanu. Masnising Ditvarim B'chalashon Shaloshines Haksav Ela Sheshines Halashon. You didn't change the alphabet, right? You didn't change the letters. You just changed the language. Versus the Braisa is talking about a situation where you used a different form of writing. That is going to be a problem. That won't be Kisvei Kodesh. Amrullah Abai. Okay, so let's analyze this. Abai says, 1 second. So b'mayu kimta lahi begufan shalan. So now how are you setting up the Braisa? So let me get this straight. They're setting up the Braisa. The problem with the Braisa is that it's talking about a case where you wrote a Sefer Torah. I'm just using Sefer Torah as the example. You wrote a Sefer Torah in a foreign language using their alphabet. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, my area mikra shakas v'targum, v'targum shakas v'mikra, afilu mikra shakas v'mikra, v'targum shakas v'targum. Nami, dehakatani at sheyichtivu ashuris ala Sefer b'dio. Abai says, here's the problem. If that's the case, why does the Braisa talk about a case of writing something that was supposed to be in Aramaic in Hebrew, or it was supposed to be in Hebrew in Aramaic? That's not the problem over here. What's the problem over here? According to Rava's interpretation, what's the problem of the Braisa? What's the problem? You're writing a Sefer with the wrong writing. With the wrong writing. Right? In other words, you're using non-Ksav Ashuris. And once you're using non-Ksav Ashuris, even if you went ahead, I will say, remember, if you're using non-Ksav Ashuris, even if you wrote Targum as Targum and Mikra as Mikra, the Sefer is still not a Sefer because you're using the wrong alphabet. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? Ella lo kasha, harabanan HaRav Shlomo Aryeh. In reality, the Gemara says, at the end, Rabbi suggests, it's really reflective of two different opinions. Right? Remember again, the Braisa that says, the Braisa, if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh, Damar Akshiech Tevena B'Ksav Ashuris, Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh, the Palaga the Rabbanan Mislisan. Both it's reflecting two different opinions. The Rabbanan are the ones who say that you can write a Sefer even in a different language. And Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh is one who says, no, you can't. So the Braisa and Mishnah just simply reflect two different opinions. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh ha'ika yivanis, but that's not true. Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh himself says that what? Although he says you can't translate a Sefer into any language you want, he does allow for what? Greek. So again, Rabbi said the problem is the Braisa doesn't really make an allowance for any other language. So Rabbi Shlomo Aryeh, Allah, lo kasha, kan b'svarim, kan b'tefillin and mezuzos. We'll say, watch this. It's possible that what's happening over here is as follows. The Braisa that says that the only way to write something correctly is how? On parchment, with Ksav Ashuris, and with Dio, is referring to what? Tefillin and mezuzos. The Mishnah that says that you could write a Sefer in any language is referring to what? Svarim, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. That's the distinction. So the Gemara analyzes this. By the way, Tefillin and mezuzos my timer. Why is that? Rabbi said, by the way, it's totally counterintuitive, right? One would have thought, I don't know, maybe that's not counterintuitive, but one would have thought that there would be much greater limitations on how you write a Sefer Torah than how you write Tefillin and mezuzos. Interesting enough, but yet just the opposite is true. Tefillin and mezuzos, the Mishnah is suggesting, the Gemara is suggesting, could only be written Sefer, Dio, Ksav Ashuris. A Sefer, the truth is, Sefer also has to be Dio, Sefer, has to be parchment and Dio, but could just be written in any language. Why is it that Tefillin and mezuzos could only be written in Ashuris, right? Why is that? Diksiv behu v'hayu. Because the pasuk says v'hayu advarim ha'ila shanochim tzavcha yom alav avecha. Right? The pasuk says these things v'hayu advarim. These things shall be. So the Gemara Darshan is v'hayu b'hav yasanyu. The word v'hayu means, the Gemara interprets this elsewhere as well like this, that the particular item in question has to be done exactly the way the Torah has it. So in other words, by tefillin and mezuzos v'hayu, the original form must be maintained, i.e., could only be written in Ashuris, and Ashuris meaning both Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew, as well as with this particular script. So we'll say, the Gemara says, my Targum Shekaso Mikra. So we're jumping back. So therefore, we'll say, this seems to be the way the Gemara is going to resolve the contradiction. That the Braisa, that seems to indicate you could only write things in Hebrew, what we'll call Ashuris, with Ashuris script, on a Sefer and Dio, that's referring to Tefillin and Mezuzos. The Mishnah that says that you could write something in any language, that's referring to Sfarim. And Sfarim means, again, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. So the Gemara says, by the way, the Brisa spoke about a case of Targum Shekasva Mikra and Mikra Shekasva Targum. Something Aramaic that was written in Hebrew, something Hebrew that was written in Aramaic. So the Gemara says, my Targum Shekasva Mikra Ika. Excuse me. What is the case of Targum Shekasva Mikra, right? What's the case ultimately, again, of something Aramaic that was written in Hebrew? So we'll say, now watch this. Bishlama Torah Ika. So in the Torah, thank you very much. Thank you. So watch this. So Bishlama Torah Ika, Yigar Sahadusa. So this is why Rashi gave this example. Yigar Sahadusa by Laman. Right, so it makes sense ultimately again that there is a case of Targum. Right here you have Aramaic, Yigar Sadusa, Elahacha, but by Tefillin and Mezuzos, where are you ever going to have by Targum Ika, Elalokasha? So therefore I will say, here's the problem. The Brisa, see, remember, let's just follow the flow. We're trying to reconcile the contradiction between the Brisa and the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah indicates to us that Sfarim could be written in any language. The Brisa says, no, they can't. No, they can't. So how do you reconcile the two? So we thought that we accomplished this by saying that the Brisa is talking about Tefillin and Mezuzos, right? And the Mishnah is talking about Svarim. Here's the problem. The Brisa talks about a case of Targum Shekasvu Mikra. You took something Aramaic and you wrote it in Hebrew. Now in Svarim, that occurs. Now it occurs more than once, by the way, but the example the Gemara gives is Yigar Sadusa. In Tefillin Umezuzos, where do you have any Targum? Both, right, if you think about the parashas of Tefillin and Mezuzos, there's no Aramaic, right? There's no Targum. So the Mishnah can't be referring to Tefillin and Mezuzos, ultimately again, because there's no Targum. Now both said the truth is, there actually is Targum, right, which is Totafos. Now, the reason ultimately, again, why doesn't it say Totafos? See, Targum, this goes back to just the technicality. Targum means what? Means what? Aramaic. Totafos is not Aramaic, right? Totafos is a contraction, it's two words, Rashi says, Tat bekafsi pas ba'afriki. It's some type of Coptic language, some type of Aramaic language. Tat means two, right? Kas means two. So Totafos means four, which represents the compartments of the tefillin. So just on a very technical level, it's not Targum. It's a foreign language, but it's not Targum. Okay, in any event, so therefore the Gemara says, Elalo Kasha. So therefore the Gemara represents or presents another possibility of reconciliation. Elalo Kasha, kan Megillah, kan Svarim. Oh, interesting. The Mishnah is talking about Svarim. The Brisa is talking about Megillah. And Megillah can only be written in Ashuris, which means Hebrew with Ashuris script. So the Gemara says, my taima, why is Megillah so strict? Dechsev kichsavam v'chil shonam. Because what's like, interestingly enough, the Gemara, we're going to see this, Josh. The Gemara is going to dash about kichsavam kil shonam means the Megillah must be preserved in its original lashon, which is Ashuris. So the Gemara says, my taima shekasu mikra. So where is their Targum? Right? Where is there Aramaic in the Megillah? Amra papa v'nishma piskam hamelach. Right? Ultimately, again, the pasuk says, the piskam, right? The edict of the king was heard. Piskam interestingly enough, is not considered to be Hebraic in nature, but rather, again, it is considered to be Aramaic in nature. Right? The Achashverosh legislated that all women should respect her, should give honor to their wife. Yikar, also not Hebraic, ultimately Aramaic. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, so now another attempt over here, the Gemara wants to suggest that the Mishnah, which says that Sfarim could be written in any language, that refers to Sfarim, Sifrei Torah, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. The Brisa that says that Sfarim can only be written in Ashuris refers to Megillah. So the Gemara says, Rav Ashi says no. Kitanya hi b'shar Sfarim. Not true. When the Brisa says that a sefer could only be written in Ashuris, interestingly enough, that refers to Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Right? So it's interesting. So the Mishnah that says Sfarim could be written in any language, that's the Sefer Torah. When they say that other Sfarim could only be written in Ashuris, that's Nevi'im and Ksuvim. For Rabbi Huda, what does Rabbi Huda say? Rabbi Huda, he desanya, Tefillin umezuzos enichtaven ella Ashuris. Right? So listen to this. The Brisa says, Tefillin umezuzos can only be written in Ashuris. For Rabbi Seinu hitiru Yevanis. Ultimately, again, and the rabbis allow for tefillin mezuzos to even be written in Greek. I have haksiv v'hayu, but that can't be, because you just said before that by tefillin mezuzos you have the word v'hayu. And what does v'hayu teach me? V'havyasan. They must be preserved in their original form, which tells me that tefillin mezuzos cannot be translated or cannot be written in another language. Ella ema svarim nechtavim b'chol lashon. Rather, it must be that svarim can be written in any language. V'rabbaseinu hitiru Yevanis. And the rabbis only allowed for Greek. Hitiru michlal de Tanakama aser. Now, the fact that it says the rabbis allowed in Greek sounds like the Tanakama says that it's aser. Ela ima rabbosinu lo hitiru sheyichtavu ela Yevanis. Rather, it must mean that the rabbis only allowed a Sefer Torah to be translated into Greek. So the Gemara says, ela Yevanis. Or Tanya Rabbi Huda, af keshiyetiru rabbosinu Yevanis. Even when the rabbis allowed a Sefer to be translated into Greek, lo hitiru ella b'Sefer Torah. They only allowed a Sefer Torah to be translated into Greek. Umishum maisa de Talmi Hamela. So both sides, before we get into this, so the last approach of the Gemara seems to be as follows. This is incredible. That when the Mishnah says you could translate Sfarim into any other language, what is that referring to? A Sefer Torah. And then really any other language doesn't really mean any other language. What does any other language really mean? Greek. But when it comes to Svarim of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, those cannot be translated into other languages. Why is the Torah permitted to go ahead and be translated into Greek? And the answer is because it already happened. And when did our Rebbe say an incredible Gemara? So the Gemara says, "Ma'aseh de Talmi Hamelach," because this is the story of King Talmi. Rebbe said, now there are a couple of Talmis throughout history. But Pashtas, they say that this is the second Talmi, and just to give you a little historical context, this is approximately 250 BCE. 250 BCE. So again, about 300 years before the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So we'll say, so again, which also puts us right around the time of the Chashmonaim, not so far off from the Chanukah story. Again, so you've got Talmi, Greek king. Listen to what he does. Disanya, Ma'aseh b'Talmi Hamelach. There was one story of King Talmi. Shekines shivim ushnayim zekenim. Bosa, he gathered 72 elders. Bosa, this is the story of the Septuagint. So he gathered 72 elders, an incredible story. V'chnisan b'shivim ushnayim batim. And he gathered them in 72 distinct rooms. 70. Now Rashi says over here, by the way, that Talmi was Melech Mitzrayim. He was the king of Egypt. I will say now, again, that's because remember at this point in time in history, so Egypt was part of the Greek Empire. So he was one of the regents, right? Again, remember, Alexander the Great divides up his empire amongst his 5 strongest generals. So he kind of, what's the word? Deconsolidated? Is that a word? Deconsolidated? Decentralized, thank you. He decentralized power, right? So you have these regional rulers, just like Antiochus, right? Antiochus was not the supreme ruler of the Greek Empire. Antiochus ultimately, again, was the regional ruler over the Middle East. So again, Ptolemy who's the king of Egypt, what did he do? He decided he wanted a Greek translation of the Torah. But here's what he wanted about say. He wanted a real translation. See, he knew what would happen is that if the rabbis worked together to go ahead and come up with a translation, what were they going to do? They were going to change certain things. Because also remember again, the Torah does not translate well into other languages. Because Lashon HaKodesh is a unique language, and we have words that do not translate. Not only that, but remember, in order to go ahead and really understand Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah, what do you need? Torah Shebal Peh. Now remember, Ptolemy's not asking for a set of arts called Shas, right? He's not asking for the Torah Shebal Peh, which is very problematic because I will say there are psukim in the Torah that translate, and the only way to really understand them is like Torah Shebal Peh, like Lahav is like the decoder ring. There are many things that don't make sense. There are many things that you need Torah Shebal Peh in order to really understand what Torah Shebechsav is saying. So Ptolemy doesn't want any games. He wants a real unfiltered translation. He has a great idea. 72 elders, right? Put them in 72 separate rooms. They can't go ahead and work with one another, and I will get a real translation of the Torah. We'll say, watch this. Now, of course, Ptolemy doesn't tell them why he's sequestering them either. He went to each of them and he said to them, Kisvuli Torah's Moshe Rabchem. He goes, right, sequester them, tells them each individually, give me a translation of the Torah of Moshe, your Rebbe. Give me a translation of Torah. So we'll say, watch this. An incredible Maisa. Nasna Kadosh Baruch Hu b'leiv kol echad ve'echad Eitza ve'eskimu kulam dasachas. So we'll say, listen to this. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu inspired each of these 72 elders, right? He gave Nasach HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'leiv kol echad ve'echad. He placed wisdom in their hearts, and Abba says, we're going to see all of them made the same changes in the translation. All of them made the same changes. So I'll say now the Gemara is going to go through the changes that they made. Now what I want to point out over here, you're going to see, is the changes that they made. Well, let's see. So the Gemara says, here we go. Elokim bara Bereshis. Doesn't sound familiar, right? Because it's not. Remember, we have Bereshis bara Elokim. They changed it to Elokim bara Bereshis. Why? Because what they were afraid about was as follows. Bereshis bara Elokim could be misinterpreted to say there was a deity named Bereshis. Right? And Bereshis created Hashem. Bereshis bara Elokim. So in order to avoid that misconception of dualism, they changed it to Elokim bara Bereshis. God created in the beginning. Good. Next change. Adam b'tzelem. Remember again, what does it say in the Torah? Na'ase Adam b'tzelmenu kidmusenu. Let us make man in our form, in our image. Now, if you have Torah Shebal Peh, Rashi quotes the Gemara that says that what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to enfranchise the Malachim in the creation of man. Why? Because he was looking to minimize conflict. Sometimes the best way to minimize conflict is to onboard people with your process. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing. But again, remember, Talmi's not interested in Perish Rashi. Right? So therefore, again, the problem with not let us make man once again seems to create a picture of dualism, of multiple gods. So therefore, again, or polytheism. So they changed it to Adam. I will make man in my form, in my image. Next, this is great. What does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, the pasuk says Hashem stopped on the seventh day. And I will say, now if you read that pasuk without Rashi, what does it say? God worked on the seventh day. Right, when it says he stopped on the seventh day, that means he worked on the seventh day and he stopped sometime on the seventh day. What does Rashi HaKadosh say? Rashi says in that pasuk again, quoting the Gemara, the Moshe stopped at the moment the seventh day began. You see, man does not know how to be so precise with time. So therefore, man doesn't know the exact moment between day 6 and day 7. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. Hashem stopped his work at the moment the seventh day began. But again, Talmi's not interested in Torah Shabbat Peh, so instead they changed it to Vayichal B'yom HaShishi Vayishbos B'yom HaShvi. God stopped on the 6th day and he rested on the 7th day. Next, Pasuk says, Zachar Unekeva Bira'o V'lo Kasav Bira'am. See, both say in our version, right? In the version, in the Torah it says, Zachar Unekeva Bira'am. Hashem created them male and female. So the rabbis were concerned, or really HaKadosh Baruch Hu was concerned, because remember again, it's Ribon Shalom who's giving them the wisdom to make these changes. The problem is it sounds like Hashem created two beings, both of whom were male and female. And of course, that's not what I know. There's a machlokes, ultimately again, what the first human being looked like, but one thing is clear, there are not two beings who are both male and female. Therefore, they change it to Zach, but the problem is if what it says Zachar Nekev Bara'am, he created them male and female. It sounds like it's two beings, both who are male and female. Therefore, it changes it to the singular. Zachar Nekev Bara'o. Next, Hava Erda ve'evla Sham Sasam. We'll say Migdal Bavel. Migdal Bavel, right? The generation tried to build the tower to do war of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The pasuk says again, Havanerda, let us go down. Rashi once again tells us who is God talking to? His Beis Din, right? Once again, if we do it in the plural, it looks like polytheism. Therefore, it says, I will go down. Good. This is very interesting. Vatitzchak Sara Bikroveha. The pasuk says, Sarah. Now, both say our pasuk says, Vatitzchak Sara Bikirba. Sarah laughed to herself. Changed it to Vatitzchak Sara Bikroveha. Sarah laughed with her relatives, with her close friends. We'll say, what's the pshat? See, if it would have just said that Sarah laughed Bikirba to herself, Talmud would have said, well, there's an inequality here. Avraham laughs, and yet he's not rebuked by God. Sarah laughs, and yet she is rebuked by God. So what's the pshat? I will say, so once again, Chazal explained to us, Sarah's laugh was a laugh of disbelief. Avraham's laugh was a laugh of incredible joy. That's why Sarah's rebuked and Sarah's called to task and Avraham is not. Once again, tell me not interested in Rashi. So therefore again, it says Bikroveha, that there was the Avram laughed to himself, Sarah shared her laughter with other people. Okay. Ki ba'apam hargushar ubirtsonam akru avus. So we'll say, so remember again, this is in last week's parasha, Parashas Vayichi, Yaakov Avinu is rebuking Shimon and Levi for their anger. Now remember, the pasuk is Ki ba'apam hargu ish ubirtsonam akru shar. So they were nervous that Talmud is going to see this. Ki ba'apam hargu ish, and is going to accuse the Jews of being murderers. Therefore, they changed it to Ki ba'apam hargu shar. With their anger, they killed an ox. Okay, Vayikach Moshe's ishto v'esbanav vayarkiveim al nosei b'nei adam. So it's very interesting. So the pasuk says Moshe took his wife and the children. I both say this is actually this week's parasha, Parasha Shmos. This week's parasha when Moshe is coming from Midyan down to Mitzrayim. So the R pasuk says that Moshe took his wife and his children and he put them on a donkey. They changed it to Vayakiveim al nosei b'nei adam. He took his family on a people carrier, which sounds like a wagon or something else. Why? Because they thought that Talmud would disparage Moshe. This is your leader, and he's riding on a donkey. Right? That's the best he got. No horse, no carriage, no nothing. So therefore they changed it to nosei b'nei adam. Good. Umoshav b'nei Yisrael sheyashuv Mitzrayim mishar aratzos arba me'os shanas. Listen to this. We'll say our pasuk says, Klal Yisrael dwelt in Egypt 400 years. Now, the truth is, here's the problem. Klal Yisrael wasn't in Egypt for 400 years. So, remember, Rashi tells, again, quoting Chazal, that no, the clock starts from Bris Bein HaBsarim, or really from the birth of Yitzchak. Again, Talmud is not interested in that, so therefore they have to say the amount of time that Klal Yisrael dwelled in Egypt and other countries, including Yaakov, sojourning, with Lavan and things like that, 400 years. Vayishlach es za'atute b'nei Yisrael ve'al za'atute b'nei Yisrael lo shalach. So I will say, so remember again, the change here is the same. The pasuk over is talking about by Kabbalah Sarah, by Har Sinai. So the pasuk is Vayishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael. Moshe sent the na'arim, the lads, to offer up karbanos. They felt, or Kadosh Baruch Hu felt, that Talmud would interpret this in a disparaging fashion. That you send the lads to offer karbanos and not, ministers or important people. So they changed to Zatute. Zatute means noblemen. So to Val Zatute b'nei Yisrael shalach yado. Good, Amud Beis. So that's the same change. Lo chamad mehem nasasi. Remember again, this is when Moshe Rabbeinu gets very angry with Klal. So this is by Korach. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, a chutzpah of these people, they accuse me of power grabbing. And meanwhile, lo chamad mehem nasasi. Now the pasuk really is, lo chamar, I haven't even taken a donkey. So they were nervous that Talmud would interpret this as saying, yeah, you never took a donkey, but you took other stuff. So therefore it says, lo chamad, I never took anything. I never took anything from them. Asher chalak Hashem elokecha. Yeah, so the pasuk says, the pasuk over here is, Upentisa, so I'll read you the pasuk as it is. Upentisa inecha shemaim v'reisas hashemes v'seyareach v'esa kolchavim kol tzva shemaim nidakta v'ishtachavisa v'avarta asher chalak Hashem elokecha osam l'chal la'amim. So they change it to asher chalak Hashem elokecha itam l'hayir or osam l'hayir l'chal la'amim. So they're talking about the sun and the moon. So they change it to Asher chalak Hashem elokecha lahayir l'chal ha'amim. Why were the sun and moon created? To give light, but not to be worshipped. Vayelech vayavod Elokim achi or Elohim achirim asher lo tzivisi la'avdam. So the pasuk says, literally the pasuk reads, they went and they worshipped other gods. Asher lo tzivisi. Once again, the Rabbanim were concerned. Asher lo tzivisi sounds like they went to worship other gods that I did not command to be created or created on their own, which once again sounds like dualism, polytheism. Therefore, again, Asher lo tzivisi la'avdam. They go to worship other gods that I did not command to serve. Good. We'll say the last one is very interesting. So we'll say, by the way, so you see that the changes they made really kind of all fall into two categories. Either things that could promote a false ideology of polytheism, more than one God, or things that disparage Moshe Rabbeinu, which is very interesting. Because remember again, the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, remember again, is such an important part of the Torah. So the identity and the memory of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the sanctity and the righteousness of Moshe has to remain intact. So anything that could erode the sanctity of Moshe Rabbeinu, or erode the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those are the changes they made. With one notable exception. Watch this. The kasvulo as tziras haraglaim v'lo kaslas ha'arneves. One other change they made. Both said the arneves is a non-kosher animal, but they did not write the word of the name arneves. Instead, they wrote the animal with the short legs. Right? Why not? Ishto shel tarmi al neves shma. This is wild. Talmi's wife's name, Mrs. Talmi, was named Arneves. And they were quite concerned that if they had the name Arneves in the Torah as a non-kosher animal, that could probably raise the ire of Talmi. So he said, you know what, let's take out Arneves and let's just instead put in there the short-legged animal. Shelo Yomar Sachaku Bia Yehudim Tilushem Ishti B'Torah, because they were concerned that Talmi is going to say the Jews are making fun of me, and they put my wife's name in the Torah. So both say these are all the names of Talmi. Now both say, so let's bring this all together. Therefore, the Gemara is suggesting as follows: really, Svarim should not be translated into any other language. However, a Sefer Torah can, Nevi'im and Ksuvim cannot. So when the Brisa says that you cannot translate other Svarim, the only way to have a Sefer is with Ashuris. Sefer B'dio is talking about Svarim of Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And when the Mishnah says that a Sefer can be written in another language, what is that referring to? Number one, the other language being referred to here is what? Greek. And number two, it only refers to what? A Sefer Torah, because Halacha L'Maisa, that was already done by Talmi with the Septuagint. Rabbi say, how do we pass Halacha L'Maisa? So watch this. So the Mishnah says as follows. The Mishnah said, actually, let's finish. Let's finish until the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Af B'Sar Lo Atir Ela Shektuva Livanas. Rabbi say, now by the way, we're also on the side of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's position. Rabbi Shimon says, no. You can't translate a Sefer into any language. You could translate it into Greek because it was already done. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Avo, Rabbi Yochanan, Halach Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Halach of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, namely, that you could translate a Sefer Torah into Greek. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, my Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. What's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's logic? Amakra, Yaft Elokim Liyefes, V'yishkon Ba'ohalei Shem. As well as the pasuk says, Yaft Elokim, God will give beauty to Yefes. Remember, Yefes is the ancestor of Greece, or I should say, Greece is the offspring, right? Is the What's the opposite of ancestor? Descendant, thank you. Right, descendant of Yefes. So the beauty of Yefes, which is Greece, v'yishkon ba'al Shem, will dwell in the tents of Shem. We are the descendants of Shem. So therefore, again, you see from here that there's an element of Yefes that dwells in the tents of Shem. Which Rav Shem is understanding, Dvarav shal Yefes, Yiba'ol Shem. The language of Yefes will find itself in the tents of Shem. I ve'ema gomer amogog. Maybe it's a different descendant of Yefes. Gomer amogog. Amar b'chibar abba. Hainu tamid t'chsiv yeft elokim li Yefes. Yafyuso shal Yefes Yiba'ol Shem. The beauty of Yefes, which is understood to be the Greek language, shall dwell in the tent of Shem, the tents of Torah. So from Rav Shlomo says, you're allowed to translate Torah into Greek. So just to be clear, the way the Gemara ends off by reconciling the Mishnah with the Brisa is the Brisa is referring to Sfarim of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, which cannot be translated into any other language. A Sefer Torah can be translated into another language, but which language? We pass like Rav Shlomo, which language? Greek. Why can it be translated into Greek? So first of all, I have a pasuk that seems to indicate that there's going to be this interconnectivity between Shem and Yefes. Yefes, Greece, Shem, Klal Yisrael, the interconnectivity. What's the interconnectivity? Again, that Torah can be translated into Greek. But why do we have a license to translate Torah into Greek? Ultimately, again, because it already occurred. When did it already occur? Under the days of Talmud. But let's finish the sugya. The Rambam, very, very, very important Rambam. Hilchos Tefillin Umezuzah v'Sefer Torah, Parak Aleph, Halacha Yutes. Aleph Yutes in the Rambam. Ein kosvin Tefillin Umezuzah ela b'ksav Ashuris. Someone about say Halacha L'maisa, Tefillin Umezuzah can only be written in Ashuris, which means again, Ashuris script Lashon HaKodesh. Here we go. V'tiru b'sfarim lichtov af b'yavani bilvad. Now the Rambam says by Svarim in general, you could translate Svarim into Greek. However, look what the Rambam says. Ukvar nishka yevani min ha'olam v'nishtabish v'avad. Pure Greek, real Greek, original Greek, says the Rambam, has been forgotten from the world. The license to translate a Sefer into Greek was original Greek. Original Greek. The Rambam says that dialect or that language has been forgotten or has been corrupted. Lefichach ein kosvin hayom ella shloshtan ella ashuris. Therefore, the Rambam paskins the halacha l'maisa presently, you can only go ahead and write a sefer, whether it's tefillin, mezuzos, svarim of Torah, nevi'im, and ksuvim in Lashon HaKodesh, in Ashuris, which means Ashuris script and Ivris, right? Lashon HaKodesh. So we'll say so therefore again, presently, this heter does not apply. Anything you're going to write in scroll form must be written in Ashuris, which means again Hebrew, and with Ashuris script, and of course on parchment with Dio. Incredible. We'll say just two more words. I'll tell you something absolutely amazing. The Shulchan Aruch says, this is in Arachaim Tov Kuf Pei. Listen to the Shulchan Aruch. We'll say, when did the episode of Talmud happen? When did it happen? So I told you about 250 BCE. Calendarically, when did it happen? Get ready for this. B'ches b'teves. Isa. Sheyesh tainis tzadikim. Righteous people fast on the 8th of Teves. Why do righteous people fast on the 8th of Teves? Shebo. Nichtava haTorah Yevanis b'mei Talmud HaMelech. The Septuagint, the translation of the Torah into Greek by the 72 elders, which again was a difficult day, happened on the 8th of Teves. Get ready for this. V'haya choshech ba'olam gimel yamin. And a dramatic darkness descended into the world for 3 days. 8th of Teves, 9th of Teves, Asara b'Teves. So therefore Rabbi said the fast of Asara b'Teves, just last week, the fast of Asara b'Teves is related to the translation of Talmud HaMelech as well. So Rabbi say this idea that the Torah was translated into Greek, and more than that, the pain over having to make these type of corrections in order to avoid Gentile misinterpretation was very difficult. It was very difficult because also the beauty of the Torah is its immutability. The fact that we have to go ahead and make changes in order to suit someone else's needs or avoid someone else's misconception was an incredibly dark day, not just for Klal Yisrael, an incredibly dark day for the world. But I will say just one last piece, then we'll go on. And when I say go on, I mean go on to chakras. So interestingly enough, just one word about this. It's interesting. We were introduced to this idea that the Torah has targum. So you ask yourself, why does the Torah have foreign languages in it? Right? Why does the Torah record Yegar Sadusa? Or why is the word for tefillin totafos made up of two words that are not of Hebraic origin? Why is that? And the great tzaddik, R Avraham Menachem, says something so beautiful. The Torah dafka includes foreign dialects to teach us that Torah can be found anywhere. You see, the Rebbe Shalom realized that we were going to be in diaspora for a very long time. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu never wanted us to think that Torah could only be found in certain places, among certain cultures, when we speak certain languages. The Torah dafka goes ahead and utilizes other foreign languages to teach us that wherever we are, whenever we are, whatever language we are talking, Torah, Ruchnius, our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam is always accessible. So whether you're with Lavan, or whether you're in Africa, or whether you're Patz, Afriki, wherever you might be, Gar Sadusa, wherever you are, whatever language you are, whatever culture you're a part of, whatever country you're living in, never chas v'shalom think that Torah and its associated ruchnius is inaccessible to you. An incredible yisod. But let's say, right, we'll have to stop over here. We are going to pick up with the Mishnah. I think we'll start at 5:45 tomorrow. Yes, we will start at 5:45. I'll say now, I just want to point out, it'll move quickly. In Yahrzeit Hashem, we're going to see, we'll say, coming attractions. We are going to begin the beautiful Agarta of the Megillah starting tomorrow. In Yahrzeit Hashem. So we'll finish off the Ein Bein Sugyas tomorrow. In Yahrzeit Hashem. So we'll begin, we'll say, Shir tomorrow. We'll begin at 5:45 promptly. We'll get through the Sugyas. We're going to begin the beautiful Agarta tomorrow as well. Shkayach, everyone.